everybody, and welcome to Behind the Mask. I'm EJ, one of your hosts, and Lori and T are also here today so we can talk about being the masks of survivors in episode 48. Darn it, I was totally going to sing it. Masks of Survivor. Sorry. Yeah, that was me. I'm like, couldn't help it. Just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or a replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. This is going to be the last episode of our personality series. We've been doing some great episodes that I encourage you to check out if you haven't, on personalities, personality traits, and things that could impact it. Lori has been recently introduced to a book called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Tina, you're gonna have to help me with that one.
Bessel van der Kolk. So it starts with, first name starts with a B.
Yeah, I will definitely put the link in the description for this. We kind of will hint or talk about some things that Lori has learned about it in this book, and Tina is also familiar with it through her profession as well. And it talks a lot about your body, the traumas that you go through throughout your life, from small things to large things, that your body hangs on to that. And Lori will share a little more here in a little bit about some things that really enlightened her. And now she's starting to think back and say, okay, this is what my body was doing at that time. We are going to be discussing PTSD. So if anyone is triggered by any of that kind of discussion, please be warned that, this may be a little triggering possibly for someone. So just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And yeah, I think we'll just jump right into it from there. Lori, do you want to hop in and share?
Yeah, I've come to find out we just like to attack some heavy subjects. Honestly, just simply the name of what we're doing, Behind the Mask, getting in, getting deep, being transparent and vulnerable. These are not easy things, and they're not always, more often than not, they're not really accepted on a daily basis. They're kind of considered touchy subjects. What is that? The third rail, right? Do we really want to touch that nerve? Do we really want to go down that rabbit hole? Yeah. And what I love about doing this particular podcast with two of my very dear and best friends is that I do have a safe space within my life, within my relationships, where we can tackle some deep stuff. And I know that throughout this podcast and in my personal relationships, I've become much more open with my trauma, with some of the many things that I have survived, I've overcome. I was having an interesting conversation just yesterday with my current counselor, and he was explaining to me, it's like, Lori, I don't think you realize that just a year ago, you wouldn't have done what you just told me that you did this last weekend. Like, you would have literally run away, come up with any excuse as to why that won't work. And you were living in so much fear and so much denial. It's a very large river, not just in Egypt, kind of, runs through us all, through our brains most of the time. He said, you have come so far. And he's right, I have. But EJ, you brought up this book, and I'm excited because I know T actually has met this author and been to some of his training, but I've been told for the last couple of years, that there was this book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it was on my Audible wish list, and I kind of kept going, I'll get there. Oh man, I should have got there sooner. just because I was blown out of the water to realize that my body, even though mentally, emotionally, sometimes even physically, I was running away, my body was keeping the score. And for me, it really resulted in a huge part of the reason my body literally shut down in a stroke. My body and my God were like, Lori, you're not listening to us. So we have no option here. We have to stop you in your tracks because we need you to hear us.
Yeah.
I wasn't hearing them. I was running, I was hiding. I was doing all the things that victims and PTSD and people who suffered, nightmares and, all of the things that I was going through. And I was still just running, like
Right.
Mach 2 with my hair on fire, running.
Yeah.
And my body and my God, like I said, we have to stop you right here in your tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And for what? At least 3 months, I wasn't walking and talking. I couldn't sing anymore. I couldn't. It was really intense.
Yeah, I remember that was like a month almost that I couldn't even talk to you on the phone. And then
Talking
when
on the phone was so hard.
it was really tough because you'd moved like the year prior out from where we were at the time, and then it was just we had life going on. And so then I remember I had this gut feeling I needed to call, and so I called one night. I remember your younger son calling me back on your number and was like, yeah, mom's not doing well at all, and kind of told me what was going on. And he was obviously very upset, so it was just I was like, okay, I had a gut feeling as to why I needed to call. But yeah, it was a scary time because we didn't know what was going to happen.
No. There's a lot of stuff. And T, I know, you kind of specialize in trauma in the brain, and I have Swiss cheese sometimes when it comes to certain things that happen prior to the stroke. I was on a walk recently at a women's retreat with a good friend of mine, and I've known her forever. And we were talking about something, and she goes, Lori, I know that I've told you that. And I went, sorry, I don't remember that. I don't have a recollection of that. So I know that I've lost some things, and it's unfortunate, but you know what? If that's the results of going through all that trauma and all that stuff, and all I did was lose a few thoughts and memories, I'll take it because I'm in a whole different place now.
Right.
So I'll count my blessings and be like, yep, you might just have to remind me of that again. I also notice even now, if I push it too hard, if I push myself to the limit, my body does this really good job of gently reminding me that it has limits, and that I'm pushing them. I can get some slurred speech. I can have some dropped words and thoughts and different things. My body will be like, hey, maybe you're not resting enough. Maybe you're not doing this enough. Get back into some of that self-care and gently remind me that I need to be building up resilience and being still, which I've learned how to do. That is been a huge thing. We've talked in some previous episodes with personalities. You know, as a extroverted type A personality, I tend to, you know, go, 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 go.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't realize though, as a trauma person, as a victim, as a person who's gone through trauma, I didn't realize that most of that was actually driven by fear. There was a lot of fear that if I stopped, I would be overwhelmed. If I got quiet, I couldn't turn the faucet off.
Yeah.
There was a lot of fear that I would be consumed by, and it's the best way that I can describe it. Lots of fear. I really felt like I wouldn't be me, and I couldn't survive sitting there and being still and being quiet. And now I love to, you know, I've done all of these things to set myself up in this way and be intentional. I have my beautiful sunroom. I have my good tribe people around me, reading lots of good books and, you know, doing research and getting better sleep hygiene. I didn't know that was a thing. And I can go out in the morning and sit there with nothing and concentrate on my breath, listen to the birds, and watch the little squirrels. And sometimes a wild turkey wander by, and not
That was
be
very weird to
moving.
see for the first time.
Right. We have a pretty wooded area across from where we live, and wild turkeys apparently really like to wander by through this area, even in a small city. But it's been very nice. I can go on a walk or a hike and not have a destination in mind, just be out and enjoy it. But those things came with intentionality, with counseling, with medicine at certain points, with learning to listen to my body, especially with food, which was my drug of choice. Many people choose lots of different coping mechanisms, and mine was a completely unhealthy relationship with food.
Right.
And an unhealthy, abusive relationship with my own personal body. We do a lot of things, but the body keeps the score.
Yeah.
And so, T, I want to invite you at this time to share a little more about that and what you've learned.
Well, you know, first of all, I kind of want to touch on the fact that, you know, Lori's body had to stop her in her tracks because she's an extrovert, that she manages things, and it's useful, right? There's going to be times that's useful. But for her, it gotten to the point where it wasn't useful.
Right.
For me, I'm an introvert. And I have a tendency to you know, just kind of pull back away from everybody else. But that doesn't mean I'm not caring, you know, that my own life traumas didn't carry and keep the score, right? Because I have a tendency to fill my plate and be a martyr and not let anybody else take it from me, because if they do, then I'm not pleasing people enough, and if I'm not pleasing people, then I'm in danger. So that's been that's a lot of how my personality works, and it led to me having a heart attack at the age of 37. And my LAD, my left ascending, whatever, we'll go with that. Anyway, it was 99% blocked. And the doctor who did the put the stent in said that if it was just a smidge farther, If that blockage was a smidge farther, it would have hit the widowmaker, which is what then leads to that instant death heart attack. So I was really, really close. I'd lost a quarter of heart function at the time of. They weren't sure I was going to get it back. 6 months later, I was 100%. So I'm good there. But I look back at that time and how much I'd put on my plate and how much stress I was under. And I have no family history of that kind of heart attack happening. There was no real reason that we could identify. We have suspicions, but knowing and looking back at how stressful my life has been, for a very long time, that was definitely going to be a factor. So my body was keeping a score and it said, stop, you need to stop. Does that mean I'm like Lori and getting all A's and taking care of myself? No. I still smoke.
I'm just currently getting A's right now.
I quit smoking after my heart attack for 3 years. Guess what this idiot went and did a few years ago?
No.
Started smoking again. So, there's one of the reasons, and this is part of my personality trait, one of the reasons that I picked it back up is because I hid it. And there's something in hiding it that apparently I like. So it's like, sneaking off and stuff like that. But anyway, so for each of us, how our body keeps the score can look a little bit different, but eventually it's gonna belly up to the bar and ask for your payment because it kept the score. So, but that, Lori is a great example of how that is not something we have to hold on to, that our bodies keep the score. It's going to show up down the road if we don't figure it out. And the other great news about it is it gives us another way to address the traumas, to address the things that have hurt us through the past, is because we can work with our thoughts, we can work with the emotions, but there's a lot more studies because of that book of what we can do to help our bodies.
Right.
We can address our trauma, our depression, our anxiety through body work. Is that my strong suit? No. That's probably why it caught up to me, right? And that's why I still struggle with certain things, because body work that's just not something I'm willing to be focused on. I'd rather deal with my thoughts or my feelings, and that's okay too. But our bodies is another way we can come in and address it.
Yeah. EJ?
Yeah, as you're talking, and I kind of feel like my body's keeping the score of my parents too.
Mhm. So it doesn't always have to be straight up, doesn't have to look like what we think trauma looks like. There's stress is the same thing to our bodies as that.
Yeah. Yeah, and not so much that, but I feel like there's a lot of fears and a lot of things that I learned or witnessed growing up in my parents' personalities and stuff
Oh, yes.
that I'm hanging on to, which is preventing me from
Mhm.
moving forward in some of that, because I'm holding on to the fear that they had. And while I miss them terribly, I can't live in the past like that. So I need to kind of figure out how to separate me from them in that way.
Like that.
And I'm sure a lot of people can relate, especially when you grow up. I grew up as an only child, so I didn't have a lot of siblings around, so I witnessed a lot more of my parents' conversations, personalities, things they did and didn't. And while I'm grateful for all the stuff that I learned, I think I did pick up some traits from them that, it's even from my mom. I didn't even know my mom was afraid of heights until I was in my 20s. I was like, "You've been afraid of heights this whole time?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Why did you never say anything?" every time I try to get you to go on a roller coaster or anything, she'd always come up with some excuse why she couldn't, except telling me the actual reason.
You,
Um,
you- I did that with my kids. I was terrified of water. I had a phobia of water, and I didn't want them to have my phobia. So I didn't talk about it. I would take them swimming. I would go out swimming with them, and I would just try not to show my fear
mhm,
because I didn't want them to have it. There's actually well, different terms sometimes you hear about that. It's like intergenerational wounds or intergenerational
right.
trauma,
Yeah.
and that we can pass those on like that without even meaning to. It's yeah,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, so I feel like maybe not the heights, because I don't mind. Like we went to the Grand Canyon and I did not freak out because I was on the edge of a cliff that's 7,500 feet above sea level. Um, but yeah, I definitely feel like some of their, even in knowing their health, I feel like I took care of them at like the end of life. So it was like um kind of their health and how they did or did not take care of themselves. Because maybe they made choices that I wouldn't have made, but they made choices for them at the situation they were in. Um, but yeah, I feel like there's some of that I'm holding on to. So some of that generational, and not even just my parents, but I think grandparents and other family members that I've had. So I'm kind of holding on to a lot of that. And so it's like making me think, I'm like, okay, you need to kind of unpack that, because I feel like I need to separate me and what my thoughts and desires are to what is being held on by them,
Those are some good thoughts.
which is,
Yeah.
oh, and I was just going to add in, and it kind of goes along, and I know we mentioned it, and I want to make sure that we say these, that, PTSD has some major kind of criterias that things can fall into. One of them is avoidance, others intrusive thoughts. There's the mood and the cognition, and then there's disassociation. Those are like four like major areas that are looked at when you're being diagnosed with PTSD. And I think we can all like piece together. And T can definitely touch on more like the specifics. She definitely works with it like daily. um, and we'll definitely leave a link in the description box of where you can find some more information out that's legitimate resources, for sure.
Yeah. So having said that, I think so personality traits can impact how we survive.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
How we choose to cope or not cope.
We call them protective factors or risk factors.
Thank
So
you.
protective factors are things like intelligence is actually a factor. If you go through a trauma, having a higher IQ can have a more positive outcome, a more less likelihood of getting stuck in the healing process. Sense of humor is another, or not risk factor, protective factor. Thank goodness, because that's my favorite.
Right.
Having a large supportive family or friends, places, people you can talk to and process. And so those are definitely protective factors. Risk factors include things like addictive personalities, traits, not having that support, having a lower IQ, also multiple trauma events, increased risk factors. Because it sort of wears us down to be able to not only recognize that we're in a risky situation, but also to be able to recover, because it's sort of like the more you flip the switch, the easier it is to flip. So, and another point I like to make with clients is that when it comes to avoidance and intrusive thoughts, most of my clients made it as far as they have because they've gotten really good at avoiding. But it's the more successful you are at avoiding anything that reminds you of it, that's really what it boils down to. Avoiding anything that might remind you of it, avoiding thoughts, avoiding places, avoiding people, avoiding. You're successful at it, it's going to get you in your nightmares. That's where that shows up. The intrusive thoughts, thinking about it even when you don't want to, and like I said, if you're successful, it's going to show up in your dreams. Also, there's a phenomenon of the more you try to avoid something, the more likely you are to think about it, because you have to think about it to avoid it. It's sort of
Yes,
like me doing like
consider
this.
that.
Don't think about this pen. How
Right, but
successful?
it's right there. I can't not see it.
Right. So that's kind of the conundrum that people run
Mhm.
into, get stuck in that healing process. Yeah, it's definitely,
Lori recently experienced that with me
Oh, where?
with the
Yeah.
ants.
Oh, yes.
My OCD when I first was really bad, about 15 years ago. Any bug or gnat that would land on me just for a second and I could watch it fly away would then trigger me to start thinking about the other bugs that might land on me and might touch me or were already on me that I didn't know about. And then like it led to my mom finding me in the second bedroom of our house in our office area with no clothes on, checking my clothes to make sure there were no bugs on me. And she's like, yeah, you need help. And I often tend to hide it now, but when a fly gets into the car and we're driving down and it's like, thankfully, like I have enough common sense to know you can't freak out on the road, but my eyes don't stray often from that fly if it's in my line of sight, and like I don't like bugs. And I lived in a place briefly where unfortunately the way the house was built, the sugar ants often would pop in unsuspecting times. And so I would often have little spots I'd have to deal with. And I definitely struggled. And now I'm like, what's that? Like I could see like these little tiny like specks on somebody. I'm like, oh, that's an ant. And Lori's like, what in the heck? And having just taken this big road trip, being in a different climate, and I think you were taking something out of a box and we were in Texas. And you're like, oh, there's a friend at the bottom of this. And I'm like, oh, it's just a scorpion. And you're like, just a scorpion? I'm like, yeah, but it's big enough I can see it. Bugs aren't always big enough to see. And then other times I'm like, but what if that, well, like that was a bug? Oh my God, what, and just, yeah, I could spiral easily.
Yes, you can. But I love you anyway. So this is a great, so we said that personality traits can impact how we survive, but the trauma itself can actually end up impacting our personalities.
Right.
You said avoidance, running away, really against the very nature of who I am, who wants to embrace and go forward and do all these things. I found myself withdrawing, dealing with depression, definitely struggling so badly with the nightmares because I would refuse to let those thoughts in during the day. But when I went to go to sleep, there was so much fear because I wasn't in control. And those nightmares, I became a walking zombie. It was worse than a drunk person walking around, really. Everything was off because I wasn't getting any sleep. And so I had to end up taking medication that they typically give to vets, to shut that part of my brain down so I could actually get some sleep.
Right.
But having said those things, T, you brought up that I'm an example of how you can change those things, how you can turn that around, So this will kind of be our segue into some positive stuff here, but in my second marriage, I was married to John Wayne, reincarnated. He was a cowboy, full blown. I remember calling my mom and telling her that at the time. And unfortunately, he really wasn't John Wayne or, whatever. He was an awful monster underneath. A predator and not a good guy.
Yeah.
So when I first, when we ran away and we got here, definitely and it's interesting because I met you, T, in that first 3 years. I definitely didn't. There was no country music around me. You could not play country music like that. And I literally would go into fight or flight if country music came on around me. In the car, anywhere, like I would just panic mode. Didn't go to rodeos. I still haven't been to a rodeo or a fair or anything like that. But having gone through therapy, having kind of gone through time as a healer as well, distance, and a willingness to acknowledge some of these things and learn to kind of be more comfortable with them.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely had some huge successes recently.
Yeah.
And on the road trip that we just took, we listened to a station that was a cross between country and pop. I wasn't triggered. There's a few songs that'll come on. I'm like, can we just skip that one? But I don't go into panic mode. And I don't get depressed and anxious. And they're not my favorites, But probably the hugest success just happened this last weekend. A couple weekends back now. I was a part of a singles ministry retreat for our church. And there was an opportunity to do some fellowshipping. And we looked, and I wanted to find some salsa dancing, but there wasn't any available on the night that we were going to do it. And the only thing that was available was country dancing in a country bar full of cowboys and country stuff, lots of it. Like,
I so wish I could have gone.
I know, I wish you could have too, because I really wanted you to be there. But intentionally, I did some things. First of all, I made the choice to go, despite knowing that there might be some triggers. Then I reached out to another woman that was a part of our group right away when I got there. And I shared a very brief synopsis of some of my history and explained that my bestie EJ was not going to be there. And could she be my person that night in case I wigged out and needed to run or needed to go? The other thing is, before I went, I set it up. EJ was awesome. She said, Lori, I'm not going to go. I have to put that boundary down. I'm too tired. I just can't do it. But she said, I
was so exhausted.
Right. But what she said to me was, I want you to know that all you need to do is text me and I will come and get you. So I had options. I wasn't stuck. I didn't have to run away. But even if I felt uncomfortable and wanted to leave the situation, I had ample opportunities and ways to do that. So I've never done dance lessons like this, and you get paired up. So I got paired up with a complete strange man right there. I can feel the butterflies in my stomach, and he was very nice, who was a perfect gentleman. We shared a little bit. He was originally from the area, he was maybe just a couple years younger than I was, not much. And, we just talked, and, you get that idle chatter out of the way, right? Everybody's nervous. And the more we talked and and it was also a little disruptive. There weren't full songs being played. It was kind of nice because I was able to get acclimated into this environment before it was like all full force. You're in a cowboy bar,
Right.
But the steps, so we're learning the steps. It came time to learn how to be dipped. That is like a trust ball on crack. I wasn't quite sure I could get through it, but I did. Very, very stiff the first time. Once I realized we got to like the second and third time, and I'm like, okay, he's actually gonna catch me, and it's okay, Laura. You're gonna be okay. I actually got pretty good at it. So much so that later on in the night, partner I was dancing with went to dip me, and I went with it. Like it just flowed and it happened. We did get to a very interesting portion where one of the moves was called the handcuffs. I really wasn't comfortable with that on any level, but come to find out, most people aren't really comfortable with hearing about being placed in handcuffs, right? So I learned the move and I did it. And then later on that night, there was this young man about the same age as my youngest son. And I think he could tell, like, I was actually excited. I was enjoying what I was doing, even with the country music playing and all of being surrounded by cowboys and cowgirls. He looked at me and he goes, "Want to dance?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." And went onto the dance floor, and it flowed. It was great. I had a fantastic time. The woman who I had reached out to in our little group, she came up to me later that night and she's like, "Laura, you don't understand. This is truly inspirational. You're inspiring, And she was like, "I'm just so impressed by, what the level to which you just jumped in with both feet." And my counselor later told me that's kind of called immersion. I jumped in with both feet, but I didn't jump in with both feet unintentionally. I did it
Right.
very intentionally. And that set me up for success and allowed me to do something that I would have never previously been able to do. And I laughed and giggled, and it was fun. And I had a great time. So you really can overcome those things and do things that you never thought that you could do with all of the intentional setup process of
Right.
counseling and meds and giving yourself time and all the things that we share about in this podcast. So just wanted to share that because you can have successes like that.
For sure.
So what's interesting is you talk about the intention part of it. I want to point out that you had intent back when I first met you. It was your intention. Okay, so, and what I'm referring to is when you looked at me and said, "I'm not going to survive this. I'm going to overcome it. I do not be a survivor. I want to be an overcomer." And I have carried that through and given that message to all of my clients as a way to look at things. Sometimes we have to make that first choice, and it's that statement, "I will not do this. I will do this." Now, it may not work out and you may have to go back to the drawing board and you have to decide if that's still what you want, or if you still want it, then you got to do it differently, try different things, or maybe it wasn't that important to begin with, and that is okay. The fact is you get back to the drawing board and figure it out. You make that choice, you do that intention. Those things are what's going to start the process. It's not walking in my door. It's not me as a therapist or a counselor. It's the fact that you pulled into my parking lot and walked up to that door and chose to open it. In that moment, you make a choice. You're choosing something for yourself.
I think that I've shared this before, and I definitely feel right now is a good time to share this. This was not some straight course from A to B.
Right.
I did get to a point where I wanted to end it all, where I was so tired.
Mhm.
And at that point, I don't think I had one thought about overcoming. I remember praying to God and just begging, asking him to please just end this. Could I please just come home and rest? I just wanted to rest. I was tired.
Mhm.
I share that not for pity or empathy or anything, but because I want to be real.
Mhm.
It's scary. This is not easy stuff we're talking about here.
Right.
This is heavy, deep stuff. And I didn't get to where I was 2 weekends ago without a whole lot of stuff in the middle.
Yeah.
I've actually been here in this state now since the year 2005. And the first 3 years was a lot of running and a lot of denial, and and then the body keeping the score and strokes. I faced death now 3 times, like legitimate. I went totally septic when I got the COVID, had the stroke, and it's not been easy. But throughout that, you're right, I did have that nugget that I could hang on to, and I did find it again with the help of counselors and friends and loving family. I say all the time, and I mean it with every fiber of my being, I would not be here where I am right now without my tribe. And that includes my beautiful sons and the women that they love and my beautiful grandchildren. I am so blessed in that. And I definitely wouldn't be here without my faith, without my God. It reminds me of that footprints, and when we get to that point where we're looking back at the footprints and there's just the one, and we're like, God, why weren't you there? Jesus, why weren't you there? And he says, oh, dear, I was there. That's when I was carrying you. And I'm like, oh, that's how I got through that, because it surely wasn't my own will, and it surely wasn't my own, knowledge or anything. I think on the last episode, we talked about that it's okay to ask for help.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this, when your body is keeping the score, you're going to need lots of help,
Mhm.
physical, mental, emotional, and you need to reach out and get it and grasp it and take hold of it. Or you could die,
Right.
you could no longer be here.
So,
Could
Lori, you
overcome.
recently had a conversation about all the leaps and bounds and changes you've made. And one of the things that I said to you is what changed is you got busy living because you had been busy dying.
Mhm.
I was busy dying.
And it was a choice. It was a place you were at. And there was no, I mean, it wasn't a condemnation statement at all. It's just where you were at. It's what the process was for you. But at some point you chose something different. You chose to live instead of die. The choice, that was your choice. And anybody who is going to love you and support you is going to be, surround you in that, hoping that you may make a different choice. But sometimes that's what it boils down to. What are we going to be busy doing?
Right.
The end result, we're all going to die someday, but it's a process. Are we going to live as if we're dying, or are we going to live as if we're living?
Amen.
Man, I feel like my head is a radio right now, because every time you guys say some of these phrases, I start singing the songs that you guys mentioned.
Tim McGraw, Live Like You're Dying, right?
No, the American Idol winner, Chris Allen, who I'll show you later. But then you said Overcomer, which means the Mandisa song. And then I was thinking Survivor, the Destiny's Child song. And then there's also the Reba McEntire version, but you're not the country fan. So then I just kind of skipped over that one, but I love that one. So yeah, kind of to add on to Lori too, I love country music. It is my go-to when I'm like needing something to listen to. And so it's definitely kind of a point of contention in our house, because I don't get to have that often, because I know it's triggering for Lori. And so I choose not to kind of subject her to that. And a few months ago, I think for her birthday, she'd been given a gift card to a restaurant not far from here that we'd never been before. And I remember going in, and it was a country radio playing, place. And I was singing along the whole time, and I felt so comfortable in this place. And I could tell that Lori wasn't. And I kept asking, do you want to go? Like, we don't have to say, we can take our food to go. And she's like, no. So I think that was also kind of the start of her like immersing herself in it, to where when she did go dancing here a few weekends ago, it gave her an opportunity, an extra opportunity to kind of immerse herself in some of that music. And like she said, on the road trip, having listened to some of the country music mixed with some pop. So I feel like she's on the right track to like getting there. And it's a long process. It's not an overnight thing. And I feel like too, like you guys have talked about like you surviving. And this is on top of your children going through things, that you often taking care of your kids first. And as a caregiver too, like sometimes we think of taking care of everybody else first before we take care of ourselves. And we stress here so much that self-care is super important, because we wouldn't be where we are right now without having at some point said, I need help, I need to take care of this. And that's okay to say. Like, you can say, I need help. And it takes like a lot of stress off your plate when you do say, I need help, because there is a stigma that I can handle it myself. I don't need help. My family doesn't believe in it. All the reasons why. But there are people like Tina who are a professional, specifically specializing in trauma therapy. There's therapists for that. And Lori was mentioning, I don't know if it was this episode or last episode, about how the baseball, like we have watching the MLB network for baseball, and they're advertising for, doesn't matter what team you're on, we're all on the same team fighting for mental health. Because there's a stigma that, men and male dominated sports, these guys are going through a lot, and a lot of them are not getting mental health treatment. And it's only been in the last few years that it's come to light that, there's football players who have committed suicide because of the struggle and the stress they were under and not getting the proper mental health treatment. And just seeing the stress and what they're putting on the players now to give them that opportunity. And all of these major, like, so major baseball players and major league football players are taking counselors. So if they can do it, we can do it. It's not just for the rich. It's not just for the poor. It's for everybody. And I was just having a conversation with a sister in one of the other churches that we attend, or in another area that I used to attend. And she's like, she's a counselor. And she's like, I see everybody. And she's like, I can see Christians, I can see non-Christians. She's like, I'm private pay. She's like, I can do a sliding scale depending on your finances. So there's plenty of options out there. And there's plenty of resources to help find those options.
So we often hear the cliche analogy of you have to put your own oxygen mask on first,
Yeah.
right? There's if you can't breathe. Recently, someone was talking about their full plate, and I'm like, what about the table that's holding it?
Right.
You and I were talking about that.
Was it you? I knew it was
Yep.
recent. I
Yep.
was like,
We were just talking about that.
yeah, what about the table holding that plate? mean,
Mm.
As much as we want off that plate, but if the table holding if we're not okay,
Right.
we're still not going to be able to hold the plate,
Yeah.
even if it's empty, so.
Reminds me of the scripture about, building our house upon the rock and not the sand. What's
Yeah.
the foundation look like? What's the table look like?
Right.
And
If the table is weak and falling apart, it doesn't matter. That plate's going to fall.
the reason
Even if there's only one thing on it.
is because my table has currently got a loose leg on it. So it wobbles. So anytime someone says full plates, I think of my table.
Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Do you remember those little things? Weebles.
Yeah.
Oh, the things that come to my brain. Oh, she's thinking of songs and I'm thinking of little childhood toys. Oh, I remember at one point, thinking of the body keeping the score. One of my orthopedic surgeons, I've broken both of my hands terribly. I have pins in the one and I have a plate and 8 screws in the other. And, they're some of the weakest parts of my body right now. And I remember the orthopedic surgeon was like, listen, Lori, here's the deal. You're Humpty Dumpty. And if you fall again, we cannot put you back together. There's no more putting these bones back together. Please be careful. Please think about where you're stepping, what you're doing, how you're doing it,
Right.
everything. I mean, they've sent me to physical therapy so much just to work on my balance and my core, because with my liver disease and some other things in my body keeping the score, I unfortunately have the bones of an 80-year-old woman. And they're very brittle and I'm on shaky ground. Yeah. So I really do. One of the things I think I really do want to try to find like a good Tai Chi. I know people have talked about yoga and Pilates. I don't know, maybe I just have to find the right instructor. Yoga is not really my thing, but Tai Chi does kind of interest me and it works on balance. So I really think that I want to, because I know that if I can strengthen and be balanced in the inner, it'll help me with everything else. I mean, mentally, emotionally, there's so many connections there, but so I think I want to seek out a, some kind of a good Tai Chi instructor, YouTube, university, whatever, I definitely want to go focus on that because I think it'll help me But yeah, so again, getting help though, knowing that I don't have that resource on my own, and having the right team of people around me who just keep putting my body back together.
Right.
I love my medical team. They're amazing.
Yeah, I feel like we've had another great episode, another great conversation, and I feel like this is a good spot to kind of wrap it up here. I think we have some great conversations, and we are survivors. We've all come through something. We've all gone through something, and it's impacted us. Some things that we go through, we are able to get through a lot easier. Some things are not as easy to go through. And that's when you need help. It's okay to be on medication if that's what you and your doctor and your medical professionals agree is the best course of action. It's not a death sentence. It doesn't mean you have to be on it forever. Like Lori, she was on some medication for a while and she's not on that anymore. And it gave her some relief that she wasn't having, and she was able to get through it. And I think that's the most important thing, is that we have to start or continue to encourage breaking of that stigma that you can take care of it yourself, and, really take a chance and take some self-care and be aware of what's triggering us so we can get the help that we need.
I also think it's really important right here to mention we live ecclesiastical or seasonal lives. You're currently just in this season, but tomorrow, 3 months down the road, a year down the road, things are going to change. We don't live in a stagnant, non-moving world. It's constantly evolving, emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally. We are evolving. That's what makes us humans. And so a lot of times as survivors, as victims, we can go through something for a time because it will change, especially if we learn how to make choices and we engage in those choices and we move forward, or we move over, or we do the cha-cha. We go a little back and a little forward. Doesn't matter how you choose to move. Just keep choosing to move, because it will change. Ecclesiastical lives. We're not stuck.
So I often liken it with clients to we are a book. Our lives are a book. And every good book has difficult chapters.
Yes, it does.
To me, those are the ones that that person won. They got to the end.
Yeah. Amen. Well, again, just a friendly reminder that anything discussed in this podcast is not to be used as a diagnosis or replacement for conversations with your own doctors, therapists, psychologists, or other medical professionals. You can find us on YouTube and most major podcast platforms. If you're not a subscriber, we'd love for you to be one. So don't forget to like and click the subscribe button, especially on YouTube, to keep up with our upcoming episodes. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as Behind the Mask PC. You can also email feedback and future episode ideas to us at behindthemaskpc@gmail.com. To find us, EJ, Lori, and T online, you can find our links in the description of this episode. And on behalf of the ladies and myself, thanks for listening or watching, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.